All right, everyone, welcome back. This is part 2 of our keychain video, and up to this point, there's some things you've done here. We have drilled all 4 holes, okay, marked with your punch, and drilled all 4 holes here with a 14 gauge drill bit, and also marked and drilled 1 on the back plate. You've also should have sanded both sides of both pieces with both 320 grit, which is the blue sandpaper that we have, and the purple, which is 600. The blue is 320 there. I've just got a full sheet here, 320, 600. Those 2 steps work great for later on. All right. Once you have this set up right now, you've got to just handle it and make sure you don't have any sharp edges from drilling. Sanding both sides should have taken care of that. What we want is to make sure that these 2 pieces of metal lay flush with each other, okay? Now there is an exception to that, but we'll get to that here on this next step. There is an optional step, and you can do some research, ask some questions, but you can actually change the color of these metals through a process called patina. And a patina is usually oxidization of metal. So if this was iron, we would oxide it or rust it, it would turn red. With copper, you can change lots of different colors. This particular piece of metal is an example of a more weathered patina. It is just dirty. It's just been out in the weather, and it has rusted. Similar to if you drop a penny on the street and leave it there through the winter, the salt and water and everything from the streets, they definitely will, it'll change color. We can do that intentionally in jewelry, and it adds a different component. This example that I've shown in the previous video has some texture to it, and this side much more texture underneath that top plate. Gives some real interest to it. It is not required to do that in this step, although it is extremely cool. Here is a piece that I have hammered and textured. It is more of a scrap, but as you can see, as I've hammered it, okay, the edges of this piece are no longer straight. If you hammer this, so I used my hammer here, I'll show you in just a second. When you hammer this, it will distort the outside edge if you take the texture all the way to the edge. It's spreading metal out, and that metal's got to go somewhere, and so it will distort this. You want to clean these edges back just lightly on the disc sander. If you're nervous about that, you can use a file, but to get the nice, clean, sharp edges, I would definitely use the disc sander. That's what I did here on the edge of this one. So to get this texture, you can use any number of ends that are on this texture hammer, and this can be very easily changed. Simply take that collar off, and I can take that off, and I can put a new one on. We have several different ones. This one is just a single little square peg. Just make sure with these ones, okay, that one, well, any of them, that you're not hitting the hammer directly to steel, because that will damage the texture end, and then that damage is then transferred to everything you hit after that. So just be considerate of the people that are going to use these tools after you. So lay it there, and this just needs to be finger tight. It doesn't need to go, any tighter than what you can do with your own hands. Some of these work better than others, and you can experiment. I'm not going to show you too many because I want you to explore. Different hammers have different roundness or radius of the ends. Excuse me. It's a chasing hammer, and it's a small hammer. It's the cutest hammer you've ever seen. has a really rounded end, and this end is going to give a much smaller dent, as something that's more round like this is going to give a much bigger dent for texture. Now the neat thing with texture, I'll get this out of the way, is once you've laid down the texture, you can take, if you've patinaed this, excuse me, you can take some sandpaper and very lightly go over the surface, and you can start to show and maybe even polish, if you will, the high spots on the texture, and you'll be able to see what's going on. Sometimes, and this is something that you can experiment with, but you can sometimes do the texture and then patina. Okay, and I'll send out a video link to a video that I found of a really great patina video. We use different chemicals like salt and water or ammonia, or something called liver of sulfur, which is a delight to smell. You can change it. That's what happened here on this piece. I used liver of sulfur. That gave it a nice, even like a gunmetal type blue finish. Works really well. I've got several chemicals you can use as well. But this is a really interesting texture. And there are so many options. All you need is an anvil. We have a couple of these. Any of the metal bench pins in the workspace here at the front of the classroom definitely are able to do. Do not use your hammers on the wood surface tables, okay? Don't put your metal here and then start hammering. That's going to damage this workspace, and we want to preserve that. If you remember, this is the measurement tool that will figure out the gauge of metal. And right here, if we go to 22, it fits, and that is correct, 22 gauge. So we're definitely smaller. So remember, the bigger the number, the smaller the gauge. The smaller the number, the thicker or bigger the metal or wire is. All right, you need two pieces. Now we know that this is both 22 gauge, but keep in mind, if this is changed or manipulated in some way, this won't be the same. You need two pieces that are exactly the same thickness. Usually you can look in the scraps that'll be on this table here. Here's why you need two. To do this, this is a 1/4 inch hole, and we can see in there. See how I've got that lined up? So if I move this around in here, you can see I've got the edge right lined up like that, okay? This other side here, I need to put this directly across and then tighten it down. What this does is it keeps the gap all the way across nice and even, and it keeps the cutting surfaces, the piece on the back here and this top plate, all parallel. This over here is called a shim, and you need to know that because that's what I'm going to call it in class. I'm going to say, hey, do you have a shim? And you make sure you have that there. If this isn't here, then this cutting punch right here is not going to go through here in a like perpendicular to this bottom piece, and it's going to damage the cutter, and then everybody that comes in after you is going to have a messed up piece. So let's not be like that. Okay, right here, this is a polymer pad. It's quite robust, and it helps to protect the cutting surfaces of all these punches. This arbor press is meant to have either a place for a pass-through tool or a flat surface. We want the flat surface. Make sure your polymer pad is down, and then you can place this down underneath the ram, okay? This ram has a little bit of texture on the bottom, but you don't need to worry about that. Whenever you're cutting metal, it's easier if you put a little bit of cut lube on the edge. You don't have to put a ton. Given that this is tight and the shim is in place and your metal is in place, and I've checked where this needs to be lined up. We're good. So this goes here. Then if we go back to a wide angle, right here is a couple things that you need to pay attention to. This needs to go around and around like this until you get this. Try and get it near the middle of the ram here. Now, if we go to a really wide angle, I'll show the end of this handle. As luck would have it, or bad luck in this case, where this is placed on the table, the handle lines up perfectly with the edge of the table. And so you've got to, if you want to put a glove on or something, that's fine. But when you push this through, have your hand open so you can see how it's dug into the table here. You don't want your finger in between here, because this, when it goes through, it can, depending on the size of the punch that you're using, it can hurt. And I don't want anybody to get hurt. So this is all set up. Make sure that you've got this handle pulled all the way through and towards you, okay? The more leverage you have, the further away you get from here, the easier it is to cut. I have had students, no kidding, grab it like this and try and force it through. It's really hard and you don't get the leverage. So this is how you're doing this. Right here, hands are open. This one's okay, but this here, and then just lean into it and you just push it through till you don't have any more resistance. And then right here, we have our little scrap of metal that we cut just that easily. The punch goes back where it should live. The little scrap goes in the recycle. And then loosen this, and just like that, we've got our semicircle cut out. Okay, buffing. This is by far where all of the rewards come from this project. You get to see the potential of the metal. Just as a review, just in case you need to know, to put these wheels on, you turn the machine on. Take the wheel, just lightly, loosely in your hand, get it started and let it go. And there it is, okay? Now, if you are polishing the cat head in particular, or any other design that's got thin places where we want to avoid them bending, okay? It's a really great idea to get a backer piece. And you can find pieces like this. This is a little heavier piece of metal, but any metal will do out of the scrap bin. Don't take, clean metal or cut metal just to have it be a backer piece. But supporting that is going to help you when you get into it like this, okay? And we want the polishing compound, and again, all we're doing is just that much, okay? And then here, you're holding onto it very firmly with both hands, and you're working in the bottom front quarter, never up here. I don't know how you'd polish it from the back, but in here like this, you're using some good pressure, and just like that, you can see how clean that's starting to make it. That the metal under here is going to start to get warm, and just work your way around. When it gets hot, the bucket of water that's usually right here, stick it in there, let the water pull the heat out of the metal. This is not an exercise in just getting your hand wet, okay? I highly recommend using your hands. Sometimes it's important to use a clamp, but I very rarely do. So I can work this surface all the way around. If you're getting black, you can see kind of that black little bit there. That's because I didn't have enough pressure there. It's getting hot. I didn't get enough pressure, so I come in here and hit it again. Sometimes it's slippery. Make sure you've got a good grip on it. Shouldn't take you much more than that to get your pre-polish all finished. You only need to do the top. Pay attention to what direction this is going. Our logo needs to go in the correct direction. I had some students in previous classes hand in a backwards logo. I don't know how anybody would want that. Just pay attention. Get enough pressure. Make sure everything got some attention. Come over here. Final polish. A little bit hot, almost got done. I want to show you this in real time so that you can see how quickly it can happen. Got my finger a little bit there. It's fine. Now you're gonna have some black on here. That is totally normal and it happens to all of us. Now, what we need to do is look at the piece. Now, right now, it's pretty dirty. So let's give it a clean, and then we can look at it and see if there's any more scratches. If there are some scratches, at this point, if there was some that we couldn't see before, it would be appropriate to go back in with some sandpaper, 600 grit or even heavier if needed, sand it, and then come back and repolish. Don't ever think that because there's scratches there that you're gonna lose ground. Back and forth from sanding to polishing is part of the process. After I get this clean, we'll show you how to assemble it. Okay, at this point, what you've got, polished metal. This has just got some fingerprints on it, so it's not as clean as you'd think it is, but we're good. We've got our 4 holes drilled here and 1 here. I've made sure that this is the front facing side of my back piece, and of course my front piece here. And I've got my half circle cut with the disc cutter here. And what we need to do is now make sure that those holes in fact do line up. And we've used a 14 gauge drill bit, and I've elected to use a piece of nickel wire. We want to make sure that this is 14 gauge also. So we get the measurement tool, and right here, 14 it is. Always good to check. I've also taken just this, it's about a 3-inch piece of wire, and I've put a little bend in it so that I can kind of work it. I want to make sure that this wire fits in that hole. Well, usually the wire isn't quite as precise as the drill bit itself. And so right now it's not working, it's not going through. So I have these tools on my bench. I've got 4 or 5 of them. And these are made for beads, but we're going to use it. They're abrasive here. They are sharp. Be very careful. And what we're doing is we're threading this through the hole here. And then gently, you're working this side to side. Take a little bit off. It's like sandpaper on this. Please be careful not to stick this in and then start twisting it, because you will bend this, and that's not a wonderful thing to do. It'll break these tools. We want them to last like everything else. And just slowly back and forth until you get that to fit. We're not there yet. You want to kind of sneak up on the size. You don't want to go too big, too fast, okay? Because if your wire is sloppy in here, it's going to be very hard to get that rivet to work. So there we are. You see how there's very little play? That is what we're after, okay? So we get it through there. Now I need to be able to get it through this hole, and I repeat the process. Okay, so now it's in. And what we're looking for now is we want a nice flat surface here. So right here, these cutters right here they are designed not only to cut wire, but you see on this side, they are flat across this surface. And on this side, there's an extreme angle down inside there. You see that? Right in there, what's happening is when I cut this wire, I want a nice flat surface right here. So I'm just gonna cut this end off. Now, if I cut clear on the end here, this is gonna be quite a difficult cut. It'll be really pretty stressful on the cutters, okay? But if I cut clear in here, I'm gonna have a lot more leverage, okay? So I can just pinch this off right now, but what's gonna happen is that little bit might shoot clear across the room. So I wanna keep my fingers out of the end here, as I don't wanna cut your fingers, but I'm just gonna cover this with my finger and cut that off. And then I have my scrap that I can throw away, because we don't want that in clay in the studio. But now what we have is a very flat surface right there. And if I put my, you can see it's nice and flat. It's really great. So now I retract this pin so you've got about 1 millimeter sticking out on one side, like that. And I kind of bind it with my finger. I'm just holding it there. And now I'm going to cut this side. It's hard to show. So that I have just a little bit sticking out on both sides. And I'm going to show you right here. Just like that. That's what we want. See, jewelry is dirty. Look at that. But that's what you want. You can get it centered. That's what we're looking for. Now, what you're doing is you're going to take this and you're going to put it on your anvil, and you're going to rest it right on the anvil. The pin is touching the anvil. Your metal is not. If your metal slides down to the bottom like this, all of your metal on your pin or your rivet is on one side and there's none on the other. What we're trying to do is center that just like this. Once you get this pin in the right place, then you take your little hammer like this, and it's good, it's hard to see on camera here, but I'm right-handed and I'm putting my right elbow on the table, okay? That way, when I hammer, I'm going up and down in the same spot, and I'm not beating the tar out of my project here, okay? So I rest my pin right there, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit the hammer right there, and it's going to flatten that surface. And as you see right here, as I'm hammering this surface right here is starting to mushroom out, okay? And then what I want to do is flip it over, okay? And I want to repeat the process. Again, putting the rivet on the side. Now I got a little off center, it'll be okay. But typically you want to make sure that there's just as much metal on one side as the other. Go back to your hammer. You see how that wire has started to expand on the top there and on the other side. And you go back and forth until that rivet has expanded on both sides. Now, I'm using the rounded part of the hammer. That's going to help so that I don't get that rough edge, that sharp edge right here. Any off-center hits and I get this half-moon dent on your metal. You don't want that. So right here now, I can straighten this and make sure that it is lined up, and that rivet is pretty well set. Now the next step, I'm going to go just opposite, right over here, and I'm going to drill that one hole and that one hole only. I don't have to make a punch because I have that hole right here as a pilot hole. So I'm going to drill that, and then we will set the same pin, make sure that the hole's big enough, and we will set that rivet. Once that one's done and set, then these won't move, and I can drill both of these after that. All right, so a little closer view. I've now got that second rivet in, and you can see I have yet to drill these two holes. The reason why, if you haven't figured this out already, the reason why we only do these first one all the way completed, then this one, is so that the holes line up perfectly. Once these are set, this can no longer pivot, okay? Now there's no way for these to get drilled in anywhere but the most perfect spot, just straight through, okay? And because I've got this lined up really nice, you see how the top layer and the bottom layer are, there's no gap in between. That is definitely what you're after, okay? So now all I have to do is drill these two holes, set those two rivets, and then we need to drill one more hole right here, and I'll tell you about that shortly. All right, friends, here we go. All 4 rivets are in, and as you can see, it is secure, and the back is there. You can see all my fingerprints. That's what you get with shiny metal. We will do a final polish on this, but we're going to do it very gently. If you take this to the big buffer after it's all been put together, you will get that black stuff inside this groove, and it'll be nearly impossible to get it all out. So make sure all your buffing is done before this step. You might do a little bit with the hand polishers in the flex shafts, but for the most part, we're done with this step. What you're going to do next is we want to mark where to drill this hole, and that hole you're going to use a 1/8 drill bit, and what we can do is take a Sharpie marker and we're going to mark just like we did. It's a fine one, but that'll work. I want to put a little bit of a mark right here. And then just lay your ruler right across here, and then something to scribe a little line. So if I get my hands out of the way, you can see that line right there. Now, all you're doing is, I can pretty well guess where the middle of that is, but if you can measure it if you want. I just put a single line right there, gives me a little X. And at that point, we can punch that and drill a hole right there, but we're gonna use the large drill bit, or large drill press. So here we go to the next step. This hole that we need to drill, we're making a ring in here. It's called a jump ring. And we need to have a hole that's bigger than the wire so the wire is loose. That's different than the rivets. We wanted the wire to fit perfectly in the hole. So right here, we've marked that hole, okay? And what we need to do is we need to use this big drill press. And right here, our large drill bit set. And right here, we're looking for the 1/8 drill bit. Now we have 2, right here and right here. Don't judge the drill bit by what's labeled here. You want to gently pull these out and check the drill bit itself. Can you see that? It says 1/8 right there. Okay. So this has a 3-jaw chuck. As you turn this collar right here, you can see the chuck opening and closing. Okay. You want to open it enough that the drill bit fits in here. And then you tighten it down, finger tight. The chuck key used to be tied to the thing, but it broke. This needs to go in here, and this is a plunger. It's a safety feature. This goes in here, and you tighten it down just like that. Okay. From the toolbox, you will need the yellow key. This is the bright yellow one. There's one that's a little more orange for the disc sander. Okay, this one goes in here and clicks in. Okay, now this will turn on. As you can see, it only goes in one speed. So because we're not in control of this, like with our foot pedal with the smaller ones, we have to clamp this down just like the safety test says. So what you've got to do is you've got to find this clamp. All right, this clamp is much deeper and it allows you to put it under the table and clamp down. I don't want you to clamp this down very hard because I don't want you to have anything on your metal here that's going to be too lasting of a mark. So what you're doing here is you're lowering the bit so that it's where you want it to be, and then down underneath all I'm doing is just tightening it so that it's not moving. Okay. Takes a second sometimes. Okay, and it looks like we're almost lined up. Now I've punched my hole for where I want the drill bit to go. I've got it clamped down, it's nice and snug. We want that to not be touching the metal, and I'm going to turn this on and I'm going to go down very slowly, and I want to see chips and ribbons. And you can see this is from a previous, that is what you call a ribbon. That's what we're looking for. We want to cut things like that when we go through this metal. The thicker the metal, the slower you have to go. And by slow, I mean pressure here. Okay? So we're going to turn this on and we're going to drill. Now you see my ribbons that I created, okay, like this right here. It's like a little spiral. I don't know, but that's what we're after. And then undo your clamp so that it comes off clean from your project. Get it out here. And if we've done our job correctly, that hole is right down the middle of that surface. Now we can take our chamfer tool and clean those edges. And don't forget about the back. And you're ready for part 3. Okay, to take this apart, because you want to clean up after yourself. Loosen that enough to be able to get it off. This can just live here close, but we need to be able to take the drill bit out. So it's just the same steps in reverse. Loosen the chuck, do it a couple times, this pulls out. And we want to put the drill bit back where it goes, in the 1/8 section. Okay, just like this folds up. Put that back in the toolbox where you found it.